Thanks, Karen. And thanks for all your assistance for this semi technology literate old duffer. My wife, Julie, is right beside me, and she's the head of our vast technician team, which includes Julie. We're going to be talking today about STEM and why it needs to be STREAM. And I think what's important to realize is that the movement to add relationships and art to STEM is not in any way to downplay STEM. I was trying to think of an analogy for what this presentation is about and what the PowerPoint's about. And for some reason, maybe because it's almost dinner time out here, I got to thinking about cotton candy on a stick. And if we think of STEM as the beginning wrappings of cotton candy as it's getting spun into a great big ball, and we add the rest to it, a 23rd century or 23rd century perspective on STEM, the ball gets thicker and thicker, and we come up with a final version of what STEM should be, and it's STREAM. You need to know is that developmentally appropriate practice in just everyday terms is child-centered teaching. It's teaching that centers on children's interests, their activity levels, their developmental levels, and is responsive to them as individuals and in a group. And that's what STEM needs to be effective. We're going to talk about what STEM is, where it came from, and what we need to consider if we're going to make STEM developmentally appropriate and appealing to the kids that we work with. There's lots of information in the PowerPoint, and the reason for that is so that you'll have information that's useful to you after the event. I use the term teaching team, TT, instead of teacher or early childhood professional. The reason is most folks in early childhood work as a team, and team members can accomplish together what individual teachers have difficulty accomplishing alone, both in responding to individual kids and setting up group activities and managing the classroom for the healthy growth that we want to see. As you form your questions or your comments about points that stand out to you, there are numbers down on the right-hand corner of each slide, this one being obviously 3, that you can refer to if you want. I use a slide with a child's chemistry creation to indicate a new topic. And I say chemistry creation because that's what all art is. It's an interaction of materials at the hand of a child. And when you're having materials interact, that's chemistry. So if you think about it, all art is involved with chemistry in an integral kind of way. Okay. STREAM actually came to me by way of a participant in California of a workshop I was doing at the suggestion of participant Thea Blair. She made the case that STEM is too rigidly curriculum-oriented very often, and if we include arts and relationships, that makes it more of a process rather than a content approach. I'm indebted to Thea for that suggestion. And you have a write-up, an article that Karen sent out to you from Childhood Exchange magazine by the same title as this PowerPoint. And it talks more about the issue of STEM that a lot of folks have. Also, thanks to Lillian Katz. Back a long time ago in the academic 80s, Katz famously said that we need to add a fourth R to reading, writing, and arithmetic, and that's relationships. I'll let you read that last paragraph for yourself. And I think her justification then is more than adequately reinforced as a need today. The intent of STEM, when it first came on the scene 10 or 15 years ago, is definitely praiseworthy. Important folks noticed that few women were going into the physical sciences, and they wanted to rectify that situation. And so the emphasis on STEM, although it doesn't say STEM for girls, that emphasis is there, and it's a very noble one, and we should appreciate it. But as STEM came to take shape, there have been a couple of problems, big problems, that early childhood educators, teaching team members have had about the term STEM. The first is that because science, technology, engineering, and math seem to be subjects of study, there's a danger that folks promoting STEM will take what we call a content approach, and it won't be children-centered. We need education for young kids to be children-centered and not instruction-oriented, because we'll lose kids if we tend to make it more formal. A second worry is that STEM might actually worsen the education gap between boys and girls. Many folks don't realize this, but at this point, national surveys indicate that more girls than boys graduate from high school, from college, and from many graduate programs. The only programs where males tend to dominate in terms of class members and graduates are, in fact, in the STEM areas. So while it's important to get more women into the STEM areas, what is equally important in the view of many of us is closing the education gap. That means boys are being less successful at education than girls are. And so the second worry is that STEM will unduly focus helping girls get into science without addressing the underlying problem of an education gap that affects boys negatively more than girls. I'll give you 20 seconds or so to read this slide over, and then we'll talk about it. John Dewey came up with the term psychologizing the curriculum over 120 years ago. What he meant is that the teacher is a mediator between the curriculum that's always logical and children who are always psychological and are learning in their own particular unique kinds of ways. And STEM, if we don't take a more enlightened view of it, tends to double down on the view that kids need to learn content in order to succeed in studies in school, whereas folks that take a stream focus using developmentally appropriate practice realize that a process approach is what young children need. You've often heard process is more important than product. Well, it's very true, because if kids have a successful experience, not necessarily a winning experience, but a meaningful experience through using materials and interacting with each other, that learning, that psychological learning, tends to stay with them in positive ways, and it actually builds brains. And what we need to be about, if we're using STREAM and if we're taking a children-centered approach, is helping every child to build their brain just as much as they can while they're with us, because those built brains, the stock of experience and thinking skills and communication skills that kids take with them to public school, will stay with them into adulthood. And so it's really important that we realize that teachers are there to psychologize whatever curriculum and education programs we have, which means being responsive to the individual needs and interests and activity levels of the kids that we work with. The first sentence is underlined. And again, I'm going to give you 20 seconds to read this, and then we'll do a couple of examples relative to that underlined sentence at the beginning. To illustrate why it's important that we be responsive to children's levels and styles of thinking, I've got a couple of anecdotes for you. The first one is teacher Pat and child Luana. Teacher Pat was going to work with Luana on this day on subtraction, the way preschool teachers do, with, in this case, 4 fish crackers that Luana set out on the table. And Pat said to Luana, okay, count those, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then Pat said, okay, Luana, eat 2 of those Cheerios, or fish crackers. Luana gladly obliged. And Pat said, okay, Luana, how many fish crackers do we have? And Luana didn't even hesitate for a second and said 4. And Pat said, no, Luana, think again. There were 4, but you ate 2. How many fish crackers do you have? And Luana said, teacher, there are 4. There are 2 there, and she pointed to the table, and 2 here, and she pointed to her stomach. That was not the answer that Pat was expecting, but she gave the kid credit for thinking in the creative way that children do. And that's an example of the charm and the creative thought that kids bring to everyday situations. Another example of how kids think differently and why we need to respond to them as individuals and not impose curriculum on them had to do with Elsa, who was in her preschool program learning a letter of a week. And I'm not necessarily advocating that approach, but the teacher and the kids were used to it. It was one of their rituals, and the kids seemed to like it okay. Well, for C week, the word to epitomize C was cat. And when Elsa came home at night, she would walk around the house saying, cat, cat. Okay, the second example of how kids think differently was Elsa, who loved cats and was walking around the house going, cat. The next week was D week, and the key word was dog. Well, Elsa had had an unhappy experience with dogs, and she didn't like them very much. And all that week, she went around the house saying, cat, cat. In other words, the personal meaning of connected to cats and dogs for Elsa just was way more important than any phonetic connection of letters to real life objects. And again, that's an example of how kids think differently and why we can't just lay curriculum on them, but we have to work with them and give them experiences that help them interpret fully the learning opportunities that they have. Again, as I said, the purpose is not to replace them, but to strengthen it, to give it a little bit more cotton candy on that wand, to make it just more pleasant for everybody. Adding art and relationships helps us to remember to use a holistic approach with kids. Art, because in education, real art is process more than product, and creative problem solving. I don't know if you've thought about this, but in that sense, art thinking is science thinking. A kid comes into a situation, sees something that they want to fix or improve or work on, figure out how to go about doing it, give it their best try, and then intuitively assess the results afterwards. Kids do that if they make a scientific discovery, like putting two different eyedroppers of two different food colors in a bucket and seeing the new color that comes out. And they do it in their art when they draw pictures. And realizing that process is the same, in a sense, in art and science is really helpful. We talked about relationships a little bit. It's flat out what that sentence says. Without cordial communication or relationships, STEM just cannot benefit anybody. So we have to have positive relationships as part of our program. I'll give you 30 seconds to read this one over. I'm watching the timer. Okay, I'm going to pick up on just a couple of points on this slide. When we use this term science, especially in elementary, high school, even college, we think of a subject that can be daunting. But if we think of sciencing instead of science, sciencing implies the child is intricately involved in activity and is learning maximally in that situation. So in this PowerPoint, I'm asking you to think about sciencing more than science. Technology in early childhood terms is the use of tools to create products and solve problems. So it's not just technology is electronic media. Electronic technology goes back to the Stone Age with the use of flint tools and then bronze tools and then iron tools. It's using any tools, especially in early childhood, tangible three-dimensional ones, in order for a child to extend their sciencing activity. We're the ones, we teachers, who emphasize relationships. And that means that we further human connections by an individual child or with a group of kids if they're working, and also among children in what we can call social sciencing. But what that means is kids involved together in a sciencing activity. Let's go back to that, the watercolor activity with the eye drops and food coloring. Here's the setup. you've got a bowl of clear water. You've got the three primary colors, yellow, blue, and red. You've got three kids working on it, each with an eyedropper. And their task is to take the water from the three small bowls of the concentrated food colored water and dump them and squeeze them into the clear water and look at how the chemistry changes in the water, how the colors change. I saw three kids working on this in a rural area once, and the three worked and worked and worked, and they worked together. And they mixed especially yellow and blue. And finally, they came up with a shade of green. And one kid said to another, "Yep, that's it. It's John Deere green." The kids had worked together and replicated the color on the tractors of a good many of their families, and it had personal meaning for them. That's a clear example of sciencing. The kids were actively involved, using technology, using tools, the eyedroppers and the bowls of water, and they worked together so that relationships as well were involved in that activity. In early childhood, engineering becomes building with objects, two-dimensionally or three-dimensionally, Lego, wooden blocks, play tiles that we'll see an example of later. Even puzzles are engineering because you need to construct something two-dimensionally or three-dimensionally in a particular way in order to achieve a product. I like this statement. Art becomes the use of tools to create a product new to the child. In a sense, those kids making that wonderful green color, that made that activity in art as well, because they were producing a new product for themselves with materials. Math, we always need to think of math in early childhood as being bound up in the manipulation of objects. If we try and get kids to memorize 1 to 50 to count, that's great, but they're not going to have any idea what quantity the number of 50 represents. But if you're working with small units where kids can go back and forth between numerals and numbers of objects, we're going to be building math skills. So that's how we're defining the elements of STREAM in early childhood. We're going to take a look at three big topics. And the emphasis in all three cases is on our understanding that the child's brain integrates all learning. It's not just thinking, it's feeling and doing, and it's interacting. Learning happens in all of those domains, and the products of learning affect the child in tangible ways because connections across brains are building, and in experiential ways as well. So our first topic, you can read, and we'll go on to the next slide, and we'll catch up on the next two topics in a little bit. If we think about it, every act of learning involves some combination of sciencing, technology, engineering, art, and math. And that understanding brings us to the holistic view of why we need to look at STREAM instead of STEM, and why we need to encourage the child to have significant positive learning experiences with the materials that they're exploring and manipulating and putting together and problem solving with. We're going to look first at art, again, as a new addition. Children learn through their art. Go ahead and read that. Those pictures from the top down are what kids told their teachers. My teacher's feeding the bird and it's raining. Me and my dad saw a rainbow. That's a bus taking the kids to Head Start. Almost all the pictures that kids see are in storybooks and on media telling stories. So it's natural for them to want to tell stories through their art. And what all is involved in relation to the sciences? Well, biology in case of a bird that needs to be fed, physics through the interaction of materials in the sky to make a rainbow, chemistry by how different colors combine to convey objects. I think as a whole, we underestimate the importance of children's art in the learning program in general, and it plays an essential part if we're trying to help kids build their brains through activities. Notice that all three of those are open-ended. You won't see outlines of objects to draw in like leprechaun men or turkeys in a program where you're really wanting kids to tell stories through their art, which means that they have to comprehend what their picture's about and portray it graphically and communicate about it verbally. That's high level learning. I talk a lot about story pictures, and I think they're the epitome of using art as part of a stream picture. Whether a kid is engaged in the essential biological activity of drawing a picture of their mama, or whether it's writing with their own level of spelling on penmanship, what the picture is about. To give you an idea of how story pictures work, on the lines below, a 35-month-old might use personal script, that's scribble writing. It's horizontal scribbling as opposed to circular scribbling that is on lines that you've drawn on the story picture paper and tells you that's my mama. A year or so later, the child might draw this picture and write on the lines below in invented spelling, M-N Ma, me and mom, me and mama. If you save samples of children's art and writing over time, you'll see progress. In fact, they're a great developmental assessment tool, what we call a great authentic assessment tool for looking at children's development in art and in writing. You have to read what you write. So writing is a more comprehensive process than really learning to read is. And story pictures fill a unique niche in terms of observing the child's development, in terms of perception and conception and communication over time. Again, it's blank paper with lines on the bottom or lines on the top that you have in your art area with markers, very important. There's a big payoff to using markers for kids, and encourage them to make their own story pictures. Encourage them to make their own story picture books by stapling together. And you can make science journals of what you saw outside in the woods that told you that fall is coming. If every kid drew a story picture from that experience and you staple them together, you've got a class book. There are all kinds of things you can do with story pictures, but you have to appreciate the key importance of art for you in that process. Of course, not just in art, but in all other activities as well in the classroom, you can tie them all to STREAM subjects. And there's some examples there. I won't go through, but you can read through them just to get an idea of what I mean. If you have a question about how cooking could be chemistry, or how whole body activities relate to physics and biology, we can talk about that more. The teaching team's job is to build relationships with individual kids and enhance STREAM learning by talking and listening with kids about their creations. Use encouragement and acknowledge and praise. And there's some, I think, really cool examples there. Encouragement, am I doing it right? I don't know how to make that. Teacher, do it for me. You use encouragement. Lines like, any way you make that painting is wonderful. It's your picture and you can make it any way you want. That kind of encouragement at the beginning of activities, rather than just praise at the end, like good job, really encourages kids to do their own work. I have a memory of a teacher who a kid asked her 3 times, I don't know how to make it. Can you make it for me? Is this good? The teacher said, any way you make that painting is wonderful. The kid kept asking her, and the teacher said, I have to go over and wash these brushes. You go ahead and get started, and we can talk more when I get back. The teacher was removing herself from the situation, so the kid was in a better position to think for themselves about what they wanted to make. And sure enough, after about 3 or 4 minutes, when the teacher came back, the child had started on the picture and was busily engaged with it. So acknowledgement's important. Another technique is acknowledge and pause, and I talk about this all the time in a lot of different contexts. The teacher encourages the child to reflect about the sciences involved, if we're talking specifically about STREAM. So the adult says, you've got blue and red, and right there you have purple. Then pausing. And the kid might say, the blue and red got together there and made pink. Oops, that's what the teacher says. The child says, yep, because that's a sunset. And there is pink in the sky then and purple. Teacher, you really know that. Child, yeah, we watch lots of sunsets. Okay, just from that acknowledge and pause, the teacher learned about something that the family does together, learned that the child was consciously able to label colors, was able to create a unique picture. Acknowledge and pause is really an important technique. Second topic, go ahead and read it. It's only when kids are able to manage high stress that the good kind of stress, which we can call intrigue, comes to the fore, and they can create, they can do sciencing, they can make art. If stress levels are too high, kids can't open themselves to the new experiences and the challenges of new experiences in order to learn and grow. So a second component of teaching for STREAM is to recognize that through the relationship with the child, the teacher needs to help the child make stress levels manageable. And here's a little bit more explanation of that. I'll give you 30 seconds to read it through. What's an adverse experience that causes high stress in kids for one kid is going to be different than what causes high stress in another. But that system of sensing threat and mobilizing the body to react to that stress is already working at birth. It works very strongly, and young kids are really susceptible to a sense of danger, to a sense of potential harm, and can indeed experience adverse happenings that might not affect another kid in the same way, or that might not seem to us to be threatening. And if we realize that, then we can work with kids and observe for signs of stress, nervousness, a fear of the new, rejection of efforts to get the child to participate in things. Those are just some signs that a child is dealing with what for them is an adverse experience. There's really only one way that teachers can work directly to help kids cope with high stress, and that's to form a secure relationship with the child. Early childhood pros consistently and persistently encourage, accept, support, and nudge in ways that help the child feel safe and that they want to pursue learning activities. The flip side of that, survival emotion system, which technically is called the amygdala hypothalamus system, is the brain's ability to develop executive function. And executive function is the collection of activities that in the brain that help the child to organize tasks and to stay focused and to solve whatever problem they're working with. Executive function works with stress at the intrigue level, but it gets overwhelmed by the stronger amygdala hypothalamus system when things get threatening for a kid. An example of a child who, in my view, and I think this is in the article that you have, that was really working greatly with executive function was Cynthia, who got out 5 puzzles, all 5 puzzles from this preschool classroom, mixed all the pieces together, and then did all 5 puzzles simultaneously. That kid saw intrigue in those undone puzzles and was able to work with them in a very advanced way. And in fact, an offshoot of that situation was the teacher brought in a more complicated puzzle for Cynthia that she did with Cynthia, and then encouraged Cynthia to help other kids with it. That's the kind of behavior that we often see. And I'll bet all of you, if you think about it, can remember a creation by a child that you work with that exceeded what you thought that child maybe could do. When you see that happening, smile, because that kid is working on their executive function. They've got high stress in check, and they're working on the intrigue that young children always feel when their safety needs are met and they can work on their growing needs. You can read that through. When your programs are developmentally appropriate, and kids are feeling like they belong and they're worthwhile beings through the relationships that you establish, they become true scientists in their thinking. They practice sciencing every minute of every day. And that's a glorious thing. Uh, when kids are engaged at that level and have dealt with high stress levels, we see less disruptive behavior. Um, and as long as our programs are developmentally appropriate and we're not introducing high stress ourselves through our programming, by making sure they're developmentally appropriate for every child, young kids thrive. Remember that I said in an earlier slide through those two anecdotes that young kids think differently than adults. Piaget probably did more than anybody to document the fact that kids' thinking is magical and it's charming and it'll change with time. And when little kids say things that don't seem logically true to us from an adult standpoint, if we can appreciate the thinking that the child is putting into the communication and ask a question so that they can expand their thinking, we're doing the very best thing we can do to help kids get into the mode of sciencing and art making in healthy kinds of ways. So, for instance, the kid says, in answer to your basic question, I wonder what makes the wind. The kid says, the trees make the wind. And if you ask, I wonder how trees do that, and the kid says, the leaves as fans, of course, we appreciate that answer. We don't correct it. We just enjoy the creative thought that the child put into that situation. By the way, I'll take explanations after the session is over on what makes the wind from adult standpoint. In this case, the kid who said this, Virgil, was using his 49 months of experience, probably more intelligently than I was, when I asked the kid what makes the wind, and he told me that. Say a kid tells you that the moon is following their car. Don't try and explain it. It just looks that way because the car is moving, et cetera, et cetera. Ask, I wonder where the moon is going, probably to your house. But encouraging the child to think is what you want to do there, not to correct with adult versions of reality. They'll get closer to the adult reality as they grow. And if a kid tells you that Santa makes the snow, when you ask what makes it snow, by shooting it out of the sled, don't correct that view. Ask a question like, I wonder who fixes the shooter when it is broken. And in this case, the kid told the student teacher, Mrs. Claus does. And my mom says girls can do that. You're encouraging full thinking there because of the communication you had that's not talking at kids, but with them. I'll let you read that. By the way, the three captions on those examples of children's art, the first one is obviously a swing set near the school. The second one is our house. And I think the kid is looking out that upstairs window. And the third one is a garden. And if you look at it closely, you can see the sun, the sunflowers, seeds coming up in fields. All of that thinking by preschoolers doing open-ended art. Topic 3. Whenever we open a child's thinking by asking questions that get the child to communicate with what they've made by using encouragement and acknowledge and pause, we're actually helping kids build their brains. Kids have something inside their heads going for them, which is hyper neural elasticity. This will be on your quiz that I did not make up. And that means they're actually building connections between the centers of their brain with experiences. Kids who speak 2 languages in early childhood have more of those connections in the linguistic part of their brains than kids who speak 1 language. Kids who have a full realm of physical activity, climbing and running and jumping, have strengthened the brain to think that activity rather than passivity is the natural state of affairs. We want to involve kids in their thinking and their doing in ways that are pleasant for them, happy for them, because those experiences help them build their neuroarchitecture through their hyper neuroelasticity. We're helping them build their brains. So, why teach that the sky is only blue when children have experienced it as many additional colors? And go ahead and read those examples. So we're not teaching fundamental science concepts like the sky is blue, grass is green, flowers are red. We're encouraging kids to depict the world in their own ways, because the subtleties that we lose when we teach fundamental concepts like that the child is able to experience in happy ways with us, builds their brains. And this is saying what we've said already. It's what we in early childhood education call, it's not repetition, it's reinforcement of important concepts. Okay, now I'm not saying that as safety needs are met and children are gently nudged to listen to others and work cooperative, they're able to respond perfectly. They're able to respond the way their 32 months of life experience or 47 months of life experience or 62 months of life experience allow them to. And it's important to realize that in the developmentally appropriate stream setting, little kids who are only months old are going to have conflicts. And here is something to be aware of. It's a helpful construct that I learned maybe 15 years ago from a young children article. The most common sources of conflicts in early childhood, in other words, the arguments that you experience among kids in early childhood, are for the most part over property. I had that Lego wheel first. No, you put it down, you're done with it. Followed by territory. Don't sit so close, you sit over there. And privilege. Teacher said I could use the Play-Doh first. Those are the 3 most common sources of conflict in early childhood. But if your program is developmentally appropriate stream program, kids want to resolve those conflicts because they have better things to do than to argue. Your environment and your materials are intriguing to them. They want to be doing those things instead. Okay, we're going to do a couple of video examples now to illustrate some of these ideas at work. The first one is about friends Abrea and Jolie, who have a conflict in a Head Start classroom in northern Minnesota. The first video that I'm going to show you shows the nature of the conflict. You can read the setup there. The second video that Karen's gonna release shows the kids not 20 minutes later resolving the conflict on their own, because Deb, the teacher, did not take a punitive approach to the kids when they had the conflict to begin with, but stayed with the kids and helped Abrea especially respond to it. So with my wife's help, we're gonna bring up this video. Oh, screen sharing.
No, you're gonna stop the sharing.
Okay, we're gonna pause the share. Okay, and then what?
No, stop it. She said to go out of it, Dan.
Stop share. All right. Okay. And now
Then go find here. Share the screen.
share the screen.
And there's
Okay. Watch Deb. And the one child, Abrea, has a white glove on. The other child has a lighter pink top. That's Jolie. This is a third child who also, by the way, will be in the second video that we see.
No, it's just got a little bit bend there. It's okay.
Guys,
Hold it up here. Hold it up there. I think we only have 3. I think we have 3. You can ask them if you can have one when they're done.
And you can I have you? Let me think about it. Let's talk about it on this. When you're done, could I have one? I'm gonna keep this one. When you're done, could I? Look at mine.
She's not asking for it now. She says when you are done with it, can she have one? Because if you're done with it, then you give it to Haley, please, okay? When you are done with it, she wants to know if she can have it.
Please. Can you please have it?
I don't think she's done with it yet, Haley.
No one can bring it home. You can't. Good. Maria doesn't want this anymore. I wasn't done with that. Well, you put it down. And if people put it down, then that means they're done. I'm not playing with you ever again.
Emily.
Okay, Karen, that's the conflict that the two kids had. Abrea just told Jolie that she'll never play with her ever again. And the video clip that Karen's going to show shows these kids 2 minutes or 20 minutes later making up through a colored bead activity.
Okay, what's this one? Where's this one supposed to go? Okay, here. No, that one goes right. Okay, and I think this one goes right here. Yep, it goes right there. Okay. And this one goes right here. Yep, it goes right there. Okay. This one goes here. Okay, because the autographs. Okay, I get that. So they always. Okay, we filled up that part. Now what do we have to do? Okay. First, symbol these out. Okay. Okay, I got that. And you get the pink. You get the pink. You get all the pink. You get all the pink. Here's yours. Okay, whoops, some pink. All the pink. You need. I like pink and purple and green. Those are my favorites.
Okay. Thanks, Karen. And adults have observed science, technology, engineering, and math in thinking about these clips, but do you see how big a part relationships played in the learning process for them? Deb helped those kids resolve the conflict of 3 wands and 4 kids in a non-punitive, guiding kind of way. And that allowed Abrea to recover from her anger at really feeling betrayed by her friend Jolie, who took her wand because she had put it down and gave it to the other girl who wanted one. And the two were able to reestablish their friendship within a half hour, even though Abrea told her, "I'm never going to play with you ever again." And you can see where the colored tile activity was technology, it was engineering, it was math because it involved objects, but it also had to do with relationships. And heck, those tiles on that lit dial were kind of pretty. So you might even say that it's art. Now we're going to see the second example, and I'm going to need my wife, Julie's help to get this one set up. This example is of Wyatt, who has the yellow construction helmet on, and Isaiah, who joins Wyatt in a big materials construction activity. Wyatt is not sure he wants Isaiah to fully join him and reacts negatively to Isaiah's efforts to have the two of them work together. But watch how Isaiah just comes through and gets the two kids cooperating in a wonderful construction that the two of them make. And I said this video clip in Deb's classroom on the same morning made her tear up afterwards when she saw it, and I'll explain why. It made once. My graduation present from high school was a typewriter. So basically what happens is that Wyatt resists Isaiah's attempt to build together and picks up a structure that he had and shakes it at Isaiah. Isaiah says, "Stop, you'll hurt somebody," sits down. Wyatt also sits down, and the two of them inch closer and closer and begin working on the same structure, which Wyatt didn't want to do at the beginning. And when they're done, it takes both of them to carry the structure over to the teacher, Deb, and another kid watches them walk by and says, "Cool." And the reason that it made Deb tear up is that she said Isaiah had come so far in that year. In the fall, if Wyatt had shaken a stick or a creation at him in a threatening kind of way, Isaiah would have pounced on Wyatt and knocked him down. But Isaiah had formed relationships with the staff at the program. His stress levels had gone down, and he was able to show the leadership that it took to maintain a relationship with Wyatt and to create something really special. It was stream extraordinaire, and I'm really sorry, I apologize, that we weren't able to see that one. Okay, we're gonna wrap up this part of it.
Here.
Oh, okay, and we'll go slideshow, play from current scene.
Yeah.
Okay, and the bottom line conclusion from this quick look at stream as opposed to STEM is that developmentally appropriate stream, the process orientation that's child-friendly and supportive and encouraging and open-ended and and realizes that kids are active critters changes our view of what readiness is. The traditional thinking about readiness is that it's knowing the numbers and the colors and the shapes and now phonetic sounds when a kid enters kindergarten. But if we take an approach that isn't just education program, curriculum focused, as in the traditional STEM approach, but we take a stream approach that's developmentally appropriate for kids and allows them to be active involvement. Readiness, we should realize, is not a state of knowledge, but a state of mind. And when we help kids get into the mindset of sciencing and creating art and being active participants in a cooperative basis in our programs, when we see everybody working together to further each person in the developmentally appropriate inclusive program, we have kids who are ready to tackle new problems, who are confident in themselves and competent because they've learned problem-solving techniques in the time that they're with us. And that's going to benefit them way more when they hit kindergarten than simply being able to parrot back the standard concepts that are really stereotypes for learning that is much more deep and involved and hopefully meaningful for kids. You have the article from Exchange Magazine, Developmentally Appropriate STEM at Stream. And the background for this presentation came from my book that 2 copies are going to get sent out to individuals at the end, Education for a Civil Society. And these and other materials, including an article I wrote on what readiness is, not a state of knowledge, but a state of mind, are available in case of that handout for free on my website. Okay, and with that, we'll take questions and or comments about parts of the presentation today that you can empathize with and understand and are important to you.
Okay, stop the share.
One comment in the chat, I agree, they need STEM so they can deal with climate change. So good. I love this presentation.
Thank you.
In your opinion, how do we personalize a lesson in a group age 3 to 5? It is not easy, kids now having no attention span. I see a lot of free play, but it's chaos. They don't even pick up toys at the Tudes room. I use math when playing with blocks.
Okay. I'm a big believer in doing things in small groups. There definitely has to be what we used to call free play, and some folks now call self-selected, self-directed, autonomous learning periods. That's kind of a joke. But in addition to free play, with interesting materials that you change regularly and bring in new ideas in relation to on a regular basis, doing small group activities is a way to focus children's attention in ways where they can still be actively involved. For instance, having kids all wash their hands 32 times and then mixing up brownies in small groups. If you're making brownies with 18 kids, it's hopeless. But if you're doing brownies with 3 groups of 6, it's doable. And so I think small groups are really an important key. The group should be family groups, and kids and teachers who get along naturally should be in the same groups. And having a period that's a small group time where you're doing slightly more focused activities but the activities still allow for children's active involvement is really important, even with 2.5 and 3-year-olds. Those pre-threes don't know that they don't know how to make brownies. So if you introduce it in the right way, they will get involved. Of course, these days you're going to have to use gluten-free flour, etc.
A couple more comments. I think the teachers who are unfamiliar with STEM need to be made aware of the importance of it in child's development.
It's really key, and it's really a matter of encouraging kids and using acknowledge and pause to get conversations going, so you can talk with them about the discoveries that they're making. STREAM starts in the mind of the child with inquisitive attitudes, with staying on task and finishing a problem, with assessing the results. For instance, you guys made John Deere green with the watercolors? Yup. And the case tractors, they're gray and they're no fun to make, but we made the John Deere tractors. Extending their thinking along those lines is the very best thing you can do to promote STEM.
Free play is the kids dump all the bins out in a toddler's room. I like sensory table and have 2 kids build with me. The childcare is so understaffed.
Yeah, I know. You guys have a very difficult job for which you're underpaid and you don't have enough resources. There's no question about that. With cleanup, at least with older preschoolers, you can do it in a playful kind of way. I need kids with really tough muscles to haul those blocks over here and get them in the shelf. I don't want any kids who are going to work slow. We got to work fast to get it done. I'm going to grab these. And so you get in there and you participate with them in the cleaning, and you're a cheerleader in the process. A lot of times we just kind of expect that the kids aren't going to put stuff away, and it's a pain in the butt because then we have to do it. But if you be a cheerleader with them and coach them along and make the cleanup process not the whole room, but little bitty parts that individual kids can identify with, you'll have more luck at cleaning up.
Suggestions for aiding children in decision-making when pressured by adults to discuss their work or make a creative choice.
Okay, don't say, what are you making? Or don't even say, I wonder if there's a story about what you've made. Compliment a detail. My goodness, you've made a tower with those blocks. And then pause. And a kid then told the teacher, not a tower, a Hogwarts. And the teacher said, oh, and are Hermione and I'm blocking on the other characters, help me. Is Hermione up on the tower? Yep, that's Hermione. And you need to get up there too, Mr. Dumbledore. And the kid just talks about what they're doing with you. So the way to get kids communicating is to use encouragement to get them going. Any way you make it is wonderful. Then acknowledge details and pause for what they're going to say. And that technique works really well for the most part to get kids talking about what they're making. I saw a teacher once tell a kid, boy, you're really working hard on that picture and there are lots of colors in it. And she said, can you tell me about it? And the kicker was the last, can you tell me about it? She should have just stopped there and see what the kid said. But this is what the child said with that last phrase. Teacher, this is not a story to tell, it's a picture to look at. And if a kid tells you that, the picture doesn't have a story and just enjoy it. But if you use those non-threatening techniques of encouragement, acknowledge the detail to the child, and pause to see how they'll reply, a lot of times they'll say something. It may not be what you expected, but they'll say something and you can get a conversation going and extend their STEM learning that way.
I find that what you say is true. When my students are having a hard time cleaning up, they enter the area and clean up with me. It helps a lot.
Exactly. It's better than rather than being a coach who sits on the sideline and kind of barks in instructions, to be the captain of the team. You're the leader, you're the captain, but to do things with the kids, then they'll know it's important and it's not just a chore you're putting on them. And that's a really important technique. And like I say, a little bit of friendly humor, like I need kids with big muzzles to put these blocks away, and see what happens when you say stuff like that. I need kids who have exquisite eye-hand coordination to put these little tiles back in the box. Do you have exquisite coordination? I got coordination, teacher, however they say it. Those are the kinds of things that make a difference.
I even tell kids I see a dragon in the carpet. That is why we don't get away from our cot when kids are still napping. Somebody else commented on that one. Yes, there's always a way.
Right, as long as the kids aren't scared about getting off their cots and can smile about that one, anything like that really makes sense. Reading to kids before nap time to quiet them down, strategically placing kids so that kids who don't need rest so much or maybe in one part of the room to kind of isolate with the rest, and those are the kids you maybe sit by. And then if they do get to talking, they'll wake you up from your nap and you can do something about it. That was a joke.
Encouragement works for my students. And then a comment to that comment. Yes, kids are all about so encouraging, plus this builds confidence.
A lot of times we give praise, which are evaluations at the end of what a kid has done. Nice picture, good drawing. I mentioned once that in a kindergarten class, a teacher went down the row and said, nice work, nice work. And the kid at the end said to the teacher, teacher, you say that all the time. We tend to use praise comments and because they're mental shortcuts, we don't have to think about what we're seeing. But if we're specific about what we're seeing and we can complement details in an encouraging way, that tells the kid we think they're important enough to pay attention to them. And that's going to be just enhancing as kids work. I'll give you an example of that. And this is a variation of this is in the article. We had read the book Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. We sang the song and we didn't look at the Interminable Burl Ives cartoon, but we did other things with it. And I asked the kids to make pictures of anything from the story that they wanted. And one kid drew a very anatomically correct Rudolph with antlers and hooves and a little tail, but the kid gave Rudolph a yellow nose. Now, in a traditional program, a teacher might say, Karen, that's a nice picture, but you made the nose wrong. No, I looked at the nose and all I did was comment on that detail. Karen, it looks like you made Rudolph with a yellow nose. And this is what she told me. You ready? Yeah, Dan, that's so Santa can see better. Think about it. The kid improved on the whole Rudolph concept. Where do you want your red light? That's the brake lights in the back. What you want in front are headlights, which are not red, but yellow. This kid was just thinking a mile a minute, and she thought outside the box. And when kids think outside the box, we need to go outside the box with them and just appreciate they're bigger than any box. And that's real important.
We divide the work, so-and-so is in charge of squares, such and such get the cylinders, etc.
Cool. If that works, that's cool. I like a technique called turns taking lists, where you list all of kids in your group on a metallic board, like from youngest to oldest, from, let's see, what's another criteria that you could use? Alphabetical if you want to.
Tallest to shortest.
Tallest to shortest if you want. And you move your marker, which is magnetic, to a child's name, and then it's their turn. And if you have groups picking up the cubes and the cones and the triangles or whatever, and that works, that's great. But for things like standing in line, or things like using a hot new activity, the turns list shows kids that you're being objective and you're not using favoritism as to who gets the turn. And I think that's a helpful technique to use. By the way, I really encourage letting a kid use a material for as long as they want to, not for 10 minutes. And here's the reason. Lifelong interests are developed in preschool. I remember a kid once who came in and loved an electronic piano that they had with earphones, of course, so it didn't bother other kids. And this kid would play that piano and play that piano. And the teacher one time disconnected the earphones, and the kid was actually playing chords. The child was a 4-year-old. It's better that that kid has a full experience with that piano on one day, maybe because of a turns list, then has to use it for 10 minutes and give it up. Because who knows, that kid could be a pianist when they grow up. Or in any case, there very well could be music in that child's life in a way that wouldn't be there if we limited turns. So I'm all in favor of letting kids use a material that they get into for all of a choice time and not having to give it up before they're ready to. That's when their attention span is longer than yours for that activity, which defines what a developmentally appropriate activity really is. And long-term interests are often developed from that kind of experience.
So hi,
We
this is
have-
Stephanie. I have a question.
Sure.
So I put in the chat box about like the sand area. Like I have my sand area is like a 2-person area and it's a high demand area. How do you handle that in terms of the high demand areas where the same person, like I've been saying, like the line leader, where would you like to go first? Then I'll go down to the next person, where would that person, to kind of eventually give everybody a chance to pick first and the next person.
Right.
Um,
That's a really good question. And my answer would be turns lists. If you have everybody's name on a magnetic board, according to whatever criteria you have, with each day, you move your counter down a notch to the next kid, or you can have a counter on both sides of the list and work up on one and down on the other if you want. And those are the kids who get that high interest area.
Gotcha. All right, thanks. I like that idea.
Okay. That'll only cost you $2.50 or a can of beer.
All right, I'll give you a lollipop is what I pass down. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we have time for like one more question. We just have 1 minute left. How about when a child is intimidated by the concept of a blank canvas or do not see themselves as artists, inventors, etc.?
Right. That's a tough one, and it's a common one. And typically a kid might have older brothers and sisters or parents who are expecting the child to do art that looks like something and not what we call pre-figurative art, where it may not look like something. The child may make up a story as they're going on. And what we need to do is give so much encouragement to that child that they feel like they absolutely cannot fail with what they're making in our program. I remember one kid who was 3, and not doing representational art yet, who was sitting next to a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old. And the 4-year-old made a snow snake with 17 cutout circles and a smile on the top one. And the 5-year-old had 3 people on top of snowmobiles on top of 3 mount hills, and wrote and invented spelling, me and my family going snowmobiling. Okay, this kid just would not work when he saw what the other kids could do. The teacher just really laid it on. You make wonderful art for 3-year-olds. Those kids are older. When you're old like them, you'll make pictures differently too, but I love your pictures just for who you are, making them right now. And what the kid ended up doing was covering a blue piece of paper with white chalk. And the teacher said, you really used the white chalk on that picture. And the kid said, yup, this is a blizzard. And my mom's back there plowing, but you can't see her. So you just have to be tougher than the kid and break down their qualms just by letting them know whatever they do in your classroom by way of art is something that you'll appreciate, because what they make is just amazing for who they are. And you push that message.